I'm quite happy to introduce the tech talk speaker, Dr. Carsten Sørensen from London School of Economics, and he has been my supervisor and also my very close friends. And I think that I'm quite happy to have his talk on the mobile revolution, cultivating the boundaries of the unbounded. It's really interesting topic, I think so. And then you can, I think everybody can jump in to say something or question or comment to it. Yeah. Okay, and let's start. Please welcome Dr. Carsten Sørensen.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be in Japan. It's a particular pleasure to be here at Google. I'm trying to collect to see how many Google shops I can visit around the world. This is my second. I have been to London, but I'm working my way around, so hopefully before I retire I'll have at least 3 or 4 on the list. So it's a little bit daunting because, of course, as an academic, I'm trained in trying to catch people's attention by giving an interesting title and then desperately try to live up to the hope that you have, that this title will also be met by a talk that can inform you about this issue. And the problem I have is, of course, that all of you live this life. We all live this mobile life on a daily basis. So all I can, in that sense, hope for is to try and put some words on your own experiences. So I'm not one that's been to the moon and come back and show you what the moon was like, and you would not be able to tell anything, whether it would be correct or not, because I would be the only one having the experiences. This is really a talk about the shared experience we all have. And I'm afraid, as a representative for the research community globally, it's unfortunately also an aspect of life that we know very little about. So when Masao did his PhD with me at the LSE, he finished in 2003, and I decided that I was going to write a book based on his PhD and other PhDs that came after. And I managed to finish the book last year, right? So I'm very slow in writing books, clearly. But nobody had bothered doing anything similar. So there is so little research on the subject of the mobile world. And one of the things I'm going to report on today is some of the research we've done with a commercial company in the UK. And even the surveys we did are very unusual, or relatively unusual. So here we go. So we can start with the big picture. So I'm afraid for a place like Google, I'm going to do something unusual. I think I'm going to go back in the past and then move my way up to the present and hopefully get a bit into the future. But if we look at what's here is called the phases of capitalism, then if we start with the 19th century, it was basically, you've seen it in the movies, it's like people with funny hair, speaking funny, having knee-long trousers. And basically, consumption was for the very few. So when there's about 1 million people in the UK back in the 1850s or so, there was about 50,000 people in England or Great Britain that could afford buying a book. And it was not until the invention of the penny press that ordinary people could afford buying a newspaper. Indeed, there was a tax on newspapers because they were dangerous. People might create an uprising against the powers. But this emerging middle classes were sort of beginning to aspire to some sort of consumption. As we all know, because we are all children of the 20th century, the 20th century was about consumption of products, and indeed mass consumption of products. And we have consumed ourselves to death, and we are threatening the planet increasingly. But the essence of it is that it's transactions of products. And all our industrial complex has focused all its attention to be good at ensuring transactions, product transactions, and to spread that to as large an audience as possible. So now in China and India they want cars. And one of my Finnish friends once said, I fear the day that everybody in the world wants to use toilet paper, because then there will be no more trees left in Finland. So this idea of a global mass society for the consumption of products is the 20th century. And everybody is talking about the 21st century and the service society and the knowledge society And of course, a company like yours is a key institution in that society. And what I initially here would argue is that society is in many ways different from the previous one. At least in terms of making money, it's different, because it's about providing individualization. It's about providing support to individuals through relationships and services. And there are lots of examples on that, and I'm going to sort of briefly discuss some of those later. But the point is, of course, if we look at the need for various kinds of technologies, that these are radically different, and a lot of the logic that you see in the way organizations behave are very much based on the 20th century, and which is also, of course, why modern companies like Amazon and Google and Apple have been able to cut through marketplaces like a hot knife in warm butter, because the existing organizations have absolutely no clue how to reorganize themselves. And in the process, there's lots and lots and lots of consultants and gurus have made tons of money trying to help them, and to absolute no avail. So if you look at this, you can argue that mobile technology, far from being just an incidental innovation, this idea that technology drives society, you can easily look at it from the other point of view, that society drives innovation. So of course, the Americanization or the forces of modern day capitalism of making people into individual consumers is one that is very amenable to the understanding that each individual needs to interact with each other individual. And if you look at this, there's of course been a massive thirst for this innovation. The fact that there's at least more than 1 billion mobile phones in developing countries. Indeed, one of the most successful aspects of business models for mobile telephony in developing countries is how small increments can you spend your money on. How small of increments you can pay and store. And what is clear is that people who cannot afford it still are desperate to pay for mobile connectivity. There are lots of these studies, for every percentage of mobile phone ownership, what is the percentage of likelihood that you make more money every month, and all these economic investigations. But one of the key points I think has been expressed most succinctly by Jan Chipchase back in 2007. So he used to be some sort of ethnographer for Nokia. And he basically says, well, you have your keys represent shelter. Your money, your credit card represents sustenance. That represents the fact that you can buy some food, and your mobile phone represents security, that you can always get in touch with somebody if you've lost your keys or you don't have any money, for example. And the argument that we have made throughout our research in the group I'm heading in London is, of course, that the fundamental change here is merely, but very importantly, that the closer you bring technology to the body, the more important it becomes to you. So if some of you are familiar with English culture, you will know that we have something called Marmite. It's a yeast extract. And it's what you normally say about Marmite, it's a love and hate product, that either you love it or you hate it. The mobile phone is like ultra Marmite, you both love and hate it at the same time. And this is one of the arguments I'm going to make later on. So this is of course famous, you might all know it, but here it is on one slide. I think there's a world market for maybe 5 computers. That was IBM's chairman, Thomas Watson, in 1943. There's no reason for any individual to have a computer in his home. That's DEC's now recently deceased Ken Olsen in 1977. Bill Gates was incredibly conservative. Microsoft was founded with a vision of a computer on every desk and in every home. Forget it. I mean, we all have at least 3 or 4 computers on us. I have this iPod on my hand, and there's a computer inside this one, so forget it, Bill. Then there's Mark Weiser in 1991. The most profound technologies are those that disappear. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they're indistinguishable from it. So the point is, of course, this is what is happening, this ubiquitization of technology, and what that leads to we'll experience in a moment. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but this basically shows how fast it has developed from 1866, when the first telegraph, transatlantic cable, allowed communication from Europe to America. And then in 1910, in case you didn't know, it was the first mobile phone ever. It was Ericsson, Lars Magnus Ericsson. He built a mobile phone for his wife Hilda's car. Unfortunately, she had to stop the car and have a guy go up and attach the aerial, a piece of wire up to the telegraph cable for her, or the telephone cable for her to talk on it. And then, of course, Osborne's thesis of prediction in 1954, which is, you should read it, it's fantastic. He basically predicted that in the future, when a person is born, they will get an ID mobile phone number. And that would last with them throughout their whole life. And it will be like a national security number. And I'm sure the powers at Google would love that to happen because it would make search much easier. There would be one key that could easily be searched on. Now the mobile phone itself, of course, as some of you will know, it was Martin Cooper from Motorola who made a phone call from a handheld phone to a fixed line phone to Dr. Joel Engels at Bell Labs saying, ha ha, if you've heard, like, seen The Simpsons. You know, the guy in Simpsons, he goes like, ha ha, I invented, because these two were locked into a battle. And the most interesting thing about this story was that it took not relatively long before the first 1G network in some place you might remember, because it was NTT, so it was here. And it was only 6 years, but it took much longer before it reached America because of regulatory issues. But if you look at from 1973 until 2016, where Cisco expected there to be 10 billion mobile connected devices. This year was groundbreaking. It's the first time in history there were more mobile connected devices than people in the world. Right? Yet, so far nobody has bothered to do really much research on the effects of that. So this is the kind of technology that started out. I thought I'd be more personal. This is from 1998. This is my first mobile phone. I thought at least I could be metrosexual about my choice of mobile phones. And then a Scion 5C, and I could read email on the train to London. Of course, this is a picture from 2010, and I'm sorry there's no Android phone on it, but actually I think it's earlier than 2010 because this looks like an iPhone 1. But the point is, of course, if you look at this development of both the infrastructure and these client parts of both GPS and Wi-Fi and all sorts of things, and I've tracked these. I have these from like 10 years, and the Game Boy is on all of them. It refuses to die. I think it's fantastic. It's like something that's part of our DNA, the Game Boy. But the point is, of course, we have to look at this as an intelligent infrastructure, and this is an important part of trying to understand the effects of it. And we have to understand it as an intelligent infrastructure that does not only include the mobile phone. It includes, very importantly, NFC. I mean, being in Japan, you're, of course, surrounded by NFC technology, and the rest of the world is desperately trying to work out what to use it for. I talked to somebody who makes NFC technology components or gadgets here in Japan, and he says the problem is everybody talks about NFC in terms of money and banking, but there's no money in doing NFC money. So, which is, of course, why Google are more likely to success than others. Simply because it's not important for Google to make money on the NFC payments. It's a completely different deal. You're an advertisement company, of course. So here you have, I've just listed just a small part of what you can imagine, of sort of concrete technologies. But one of the most important aspects of that is M2M, or machine-to-machine communication, which is storming ahead and becoming more and more important. Until the day where Skynet will officially do out with all of us. And yes. So the simple picture, of course, is this one: is that in every pocket and handbag and chair and wherever you can imagine, there'll be stuff involved with collecting data. You can enter data. It'll be deeply personalized. And there'll be very fast connectivity to various kind of cloud services. So this is how it is now. There's nothing contentious about that. I have a small picture that shows, might actually be a bit difficult to see there, but it just shows, it's from The Economist, it basically shows the evolution of personal computing from 1975 until 2011. And you just see all these kind of devices that are mobile or portable devices. So here's the RIM. What's the green one? What's the green thing? Symbian. That's the Symbian one. Oh, sorry, yes, Symbian one. Oh dear. I used to know some of the Symbian people. I mean, they're not happy at the moment. You're not supposed to laugh. You're supposed to be sympathetic. Okay, so you have this incredible growth, and of course, somebody once told me, I can't remember who, but if you take the world's expenditure on communication and measures that against the world total expenditure on computation, then there's no competition. Ordinary people are much more willing to spend money on communication products or services than they are on computational products or services. So this idea, here's a mobile phone, here's a PDA. Which one is going to win? The mobile phone. It's never going to be the PDA. And of course, in communication, people spend quite a lot of money on television, radio, CDs, movies. So this idea of human interaction, either by proxy or directly, is incurring much greater expenditure than this idea that you can have a PC on your desk. And if you look at the rate by which Android and iPad and iPhone and RIM, the incredible strong diffusion curve here is, of course, an example of the fact that they tap into an undemanded need. I'm sorry, I should have taken Google Plus, but Google Plus is not yet the third largest country in the world. Okay, so there's China and India, and then there's oi. There you go. Larry didn't like it. Here we go.
Sensor.
I had expected that. So 50% of users of Facebook, they log on any day, and Jungian, how much time do they spend?
49 minutes.
This is Professor Jungian Yu. He's very famous. He's from Temple University. He's come just to listen to me, so I better do well. And there's Professor Ulla Henfridsson from Chalmers University is there, and my wife. So I'm in trouble no matter what I do. So the point is, of course, so that when I first saw Facebook and got my account, and I thought, this is useless. When I got Twitter, I thought, this is completely useless. And look how wrong I was. And lots of people were wrong about this, that it has somehow tapped into a need. And if you want to explain it sort of in larger terms, this is actually, it's from Lutinen and you, and this is you. You are you. So this is from a paper they wrote where they basically argue that the process that we are experiencing, one that has three forces that comes together in a perfect storm. The first force is you have mass scale. So the fact that everybody has access to the technology, the mobile technology and internet technology together, it is mobile, or I would say portable. You can carry it with you. And then it's a convergence, and digital convergence, we will talk about that later, but this idea of converging various media into one, that creates this incredibly strong force that allows new things to happen in fairly unexpected ways. So I'm just going to pause a bit and just relate to some studies we did, just to give you a glimpse of these mobile life reports we wrote with Carphone Warehouse some years ago, from 2006 to 2008. So we looked at wireless life across the UK, US, Germany, Spain, France, and Sweden in a number of surveys. And they're all available on the web. You can download the reports. I don't know how relevant they are anymore, because the last one was done in 2008, literally collected the data just when the iPhone had begun to launch. So it just goes to show, it's a lot of it is old news, but since communication is such an incredible, important part of the use of mobile technology, some of it will be still relevant. So if you look at the 60% of adults in the US and the UK has one or more laptops in 2008. If you look at it already now, stationary computers are on the way down. People want some sort of portability. 70% of people make 1 to 5 calls a day. So what we saw was relatively low intensity of calls. And we saw SMS messages replacing voice calls. And we also saw already in 2008 that the group of 16 to 18-year-old Americans, they were using SMS messages like you couldn't imagine. It was on average like 16 to 20 a day, and that's average. It was incredible heavy intense use. I think one factor there could be the popularity of BlackBerry, because these messages then were free. Only 40% of people would turn their phone off completely when having sex, and this was among 17,000 adults, and this was in 2006. So there's two explanations of this. One is that English people are so passionate that they don't have time to touch the phone when they throw themselves in each other's arms. Having lived in England since 1995, I can refuse that hypothesis. So it is clearly because people cannot think of the option of turning it off. It just has to be turned on. That's why, of course, the iPhone button of silence and not silence is a stroke of genius, because all people want is to not have it ring, but they want to know if anybody tries to call them. 30% of adults admit to having checked their partner's email or internet search history, and 1 in 10 has done the same to a friend. I won't be embarrassing here and ask people to put up their hand, but this idea that a third of adults, they admit checking their partner's mobile phone. So it is of course to see if they have been up to something, which of course statistically they have. 30% of youngsters interact with strangers online, very disturbing, and 10% admit to being bullied on a mobile phone.
Sorry, what do you define as youngster? What age group?
So I think it's a bit. They are not children and they're not adults. So there's some legal issues. So the survey we did was in England, between I think from the age of 10 up to the age of 18. Yeah, so that's a youngster. So admit to 10% of the people, of the adults, admit to being addicted, and why did I write this? So this is a new talk, so I'm being puzzled. Yeah. Okay, so this is. Why would I say this? Okay. so what this is, because it's got nothing to do with the survey. It must have been cut and paste error. So what happened? What happened when we look at these data is if we make a distinction between moral issues and etiquette issues. So the moral issues are like what is really right and wrong. Like thou shalt not kill thy neighbor's wife or something. Yes, thou shalt not possess thy neighbor's stuff. All of these, they are moral issues. Then there is incredible homogeneous attitudes across all countries, across all age groups, like what is right and what is wrong. So if we ask people, which I think we did, was it right for you to check your partner's mobile? They would all say, no, it was not very right, but I did it anyway. so that's like a moral issue. Whereas the etiquette issue is like if you had a mobile phone call. If you had a mobile phone call now, if your phone would vibrate now, how many would go out and pick up the call? Wow. One. No, I think it's because you're Japanese, you feel there has to be one that says yes. You're just being polite. No, so these matters of etiquette. So what really is the case here is that people find it very difficult, and they have very, very different attitudes. So the younger people are, the more they think it's right to text and talk with other people. Whereas once you reach a certain age group, about 40, there's like, no, you never do this. But if you look at it, the behavior, the actual behavior, people still do. I mean, people still, even though they don't think it's right, there's this notion of how you behave is changing. This one here, 90%, and this was in 2008. 90%, exactly the same across US and UK. Said that they access internet when they're on holiday to read personal email. 90%. So it's connectivity. It's not to check the weather, current affairs, and not even work email. It's just you cannot stop. You want to connect to other people. So we asked people which of the following they had done. So then finished a relationship by text message, talk on a mobile phone during a romantic meal, flirt by text with somebody else than your partner, checking your partner's text message, sending a text message containing a lie, saying sorry by text to avoid saying it in person. And the message here is the French are both rude and honest. But the point is, of course, yes.
I'm not French, but I used to live in France, and the SMS service is super cheap in France, so that's easier to send messages.
So what are you Canadian then? Okay. I don't know. I'm not French, but but it's very of course it's interesting to find the difference. But what's really interesting is how people's etiquette changes. And there's a very, very nice book on that, an academic book by Rich Ling called New Tech, New Ties on MIT Press 2010, where he goes through in great detail and really explores social life, of how social life is both the same and very different through the use of mobile technology. And there's also, of course, we also found that the UK was the most texting nation of all the 6 nations we studied. And one reason for that was clearly obvious is that the UK mobile sector, mobile market is more advanced than most of the other markets we studied. But also I think in English psyche, this idea of creating some distance between you. And this is clearly a very important use and this warms me up to one of the main points I'm going to make, that the technology has 2 contradicting purposes at the same time. Which is, on the one hand, it can be used by people, so SMS messages can be used by people who would like to create a distance. It's easier to fire somebody on text message. You can't hear them cry. It's like, I'm sorry, I'm really, really sorry, but I only have 160 characters, you're fired. So, on the other hand, you can also argue, like Christian from Paris, who argues that these constant connectivity, it creates a connected presence. It contains the opportunity for people to sense a kind of presence by connecting to each other very frequently. So that to sort of negate the distance by having these constant cues that somehow makes up for this lack of co-presence. So this is an important point we're going to touch upon later. So this was Masao. I don't know, should I say Masao-san or Masao-sama, or this was Masao. This was Masao's, one of the models we came up with through his PhD, where what you can say is, and I want to sort of dispute this model today, that's my whole purpose, so to say, something has happened since 2001. So we have, of course, this mobilization of interaction leads to spatial fluidity. Of course, that you used to be rigidly confined to only talk to people when you're in the same room. Now you can cross distances, at least within the planet. Temporally, you can also argue that what used to be defined as, you could say, a linear clock time in our interaction is now replaced with what's called social time, that the temporality is socially defined. You all know that because I assume most people here work in projects. In the beginning of the project, time is very slow and stretched out. At the end of the project, time is very unstretched and very short. So you have this the social definition of when are we busy, when are we not busy, how late are we, is changing through this ability to stretch time and compress it with mobile technology. And of course, contextually, our context, the context we are baked in, used to be sort of situated by exactly who we were with, what resources we had, what we were doing, and now it can be much more flexibly coordinated because all the mobile phone does really is it penetrates one context and connects it to another. And then people will have to make up for this and say, hello, are you busy? What are you doing? It's one of the most common things people ask each other because they don't know. So what's come out of all of this, I would argue, stand over here a bit, is sort of a technological mess. Okay, so there's this technological complex mess of gadgets and services, but what's really interesting is when you look at it sort of in the wild, it also creates this emerging mess. And I just want to point out one picture because my wife will recognize it. This is when we went to Venice in 2004. We had a very romantic trip with a gondola down the canals of Venice. And this guy was on the mobile phone the entire time, talking to the auto repair shop about having his car repaired. And I thought, point one, this is not very romantic. Point two, why does he have a car? He's in Venice, but I mean, so we see this mess. And of course, in terms of work, if you look at it, that's what so Masao and our colleagues have spent a decade or more studying, is what happens all this at work. And of course, what you can say is that you can distinguish between co-located work and remote working, and stationary work and mobile working. So this is sort of local movement, and this is more remote positioning. And you can say that traditional office work, which is based on one place and not moving. Then you can have a medical professionals, they typically go round, so they have to go where the patients are because they've got broken legs and stuff, so you have to work as a professional. And then you have virtual team working or teleworkers that have fixed locations but remotely. And of course what's happening is this strong move up towards mobile working where you not only do you not know where people are, you can't get hold of them very quickly. And it's actually interesting, modern companies like Google, they take a very dim view to mobile working. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. And for me, that's an interesting sign. And this is one of the main arguments I'm going to make today. That all this technology, it allows these huge explosion of all the boundaries, which means you have to invent new ones. And it's so difficult to invent new ones that the easiest one is just to say, you stay here. And there are reasons for that. And so this is my friend, in quotation marks, Steve Mann. He's been wearing computers since the late 70s. And Jungian and I, we invited him to be a keynote speaker at a conference once, some years ago in 2005. And he sent a long email with a PDF saying, I would love to be a speaker, it'll be $50,000, and this is the stage I want and the lighting. And it was a small academic conference, so since then I've mocked him every single time I go talk. So I want to ask the women in the room, this is a ritual, whether it is in technological development is always an improvement. So you can see more of Steve's face. And the answer is no, it was not an improvement. But anyway, so the point of this, I'm not trying to clever here, but the point of the slide is really that he has spent almost his entire academic career trying to invent technology that allows him to be a cyborg, and yet we are all now cyborgs. We all have cameras in our pockets, in our phones. We all have everything he has. We have now. It's just called a smartphone. So the point is, all this bespoke, hardcore stuff that cost a fortune is now with everybody's pocket. It's slightly different, but the effect is the same. And that's very, very interesting. Because that means that, and he's written a very interesting book on when everybody in the world can survey you, you can use this stuff to survey them. And this book was actually quite ahead of its time. Because what you see now is, of course, this modern day journalism, the uprising in North Africa and all of that, is examples of how people use this technology. Very famously in Iran, during the riots in Iran, that this technology is used as distributed means of surveying the ones who survey us. So it's very, very interesting. However, the problem is that it provides one thing mainly, and which is dirt cheap connectivity. So this is what we get. This is an old Honeywell Bull advertisement from 1981. What the heck is electronic email? It's to date the most precise description to me of what electronic mail is. As I hope you will agree with me. So what happens can be explained in terms of sort of simple metaphors. That you have stability in the old offices, and actually modern companies like Google, of course, are trying to reinforce and maintain. Namely, you have the boundaries of office buildings, and you have what Moll and Law called regions. So you can play hide and seek. Of course, you can't play hide and seek anymore because you have your bloody mobile phone with you. Whereas in the old days, you could play hide and seek. And this is from an insurance company back in the 50s in New York. Look, all the women are sitting in the middle, sitting straight, and all the men are sitting in the sides, more slapdash. It's a man's world. My wife has asked me to say this. Then came the replacement of you can say network. So this notion we have is that we live in a networked world where we have all these network connections. But the problem with that one is it doesn't work because it's not a stable state. This is an intermittent state that we never experienced. Well, maybe when we had our first email we experienced it, but now we have moved on. Because this one has this notion that you're still in control. That you're in control of connectivity. But if I did a quick straw poll, I would guess that most people here would not know who the next email would be from or when you would get your next call. It'll be, you're surfing. So you are here surfing, and it's not always you surf the pipe. Sometimes you are what they in Hawaii call in the washing machine, when you fall off the wave and you get down there for a couple of minutes. And the problem is, of course, that you are not in control. It's a fluid state where you're trying to come to terms with every changing situation throughout the day. I'm just going to see what slide I'm on. Oh dear. Okay. I'm not going to be able to finish, but it's okay. You won't know what you're missing. So the problem we have is that the way we see the world is often, like in this Bruegel the Elder's picture from Künstlerhaus in Vienna, this is a catalogue of children's games from the Middle Ages and from medieval times, where there's this interaction that you meet people and you make business, you make fun, and you have connections, and you can be on Facebook and Twitter. Like you can have people here. This is a Facebook and this is Twitter. Over here is Google Plus. It's a little bit on its own. You might get somebody to play with soon. You never know. but the point is, of course, this is a fake picture. It's a false picture. It's one without boundaries. And the problem is, the biggest problem is, this is not scalable. This unboundedness of interaction is not scalable, and that's the problem we have now. I'm going to skip this one. Sorry, it's a really good point, but I'm going to skip it. There's a paper on that you can read. Just to let you know that this is digital convergence. Hello, Bob, it's your father again. I have another question about my new computer. Can I take a movie from a cable TV, then fax it from my VCR to my CD-ROM, then email it to my brother's cellular phone so he can make a copy on his neighbor's camcorder? That's the situation. And what that does, just to give you the highlight of what I was going to say, what that does, it takes all these nice verticals between content, application, and infrastructures, and it just explodes the boundaries. So here, I could replace Apple with Google, and with Amazon and with Facebook. These new institutions comes in and they can stretch the content, application, and infrastructure and grab the control. It's a different topic altogether. But the technological development is one where you move from desktop PCs and laptop PCs and washing machines, which are pervasive, that knows how dirty the clothes is, and other kinds of pervasive technology, and you end up with this ubiquitization of technology access. And you have this notion that people then have ubiquitous interconnectivity. You can do anything you want, anytime you want. That's the whole notion. But not always, because the problem is, of course, in all of this, anything can be screwed up more by a computer. It can multiply the screwing up. So this is a news story recently. Volkswagen turns off BlackBerry email after work hours, right? So the problem is, if we look at the relationship between humans and technology, then this is a process of continuous mutual adjustment. And if it's just a product, it's not such a big deal. It's a fairly straightforward issue. So you get a new pair of shoes and you walk in them and they became your shoes. The problem we have is when it's services, then it involves a constant mutual adjustment between the user and the service that they engage with. And of course at Google you know that really well, because the way you innovate is to try small changes and then people have to adjust and see how they think about this adjustment. But the problem is also that this relationship between the customer and the services they use, it cannot be described in the same simple manners. If you take this as a computer musician from the Bay Area in San Francisco, so he has both very fixed and very fluid working life. So he sits at a desk, and when he needs to sleep, he rolls back, and then he drops in here, and then he sleeps, and then he goes back to work. So it's very fixed work, but his work is all on the computer, all on the internet. So this notion of the relationship between the technology and him is a very complex one. So Arnold, he wrote a paper in 2003 that basically argued, like philosophical argument, that the way to understand the relationship between people and technology, and for example the mobile phone, is as a paradox. There's a paradoxical relationship. So let's take an example. So this is sort of an attempt to codify aspects of our lives. So who we are both adult and child, we are both producers and consumers, we are both mother and breadwinner, we are both private and public. So there are all these aspects of our lives. And then you take this affordance of the technology and drops in the middle of it. And we cannot assume that there's a straightforward relationship between these. So there's not this old-fashioned notion that the affordance would lead through a linear performance based on a purpose. What he says is, of course, that this affordance, there can be all sorts of directions to meet a certain purpose. So take the example of the mobile phone. It liberates us and enslaves us at the same time. You're infinitely free to go wherever you want, but you can always be reached. Right? So it's both sides at the same time. And indeed this relates, although Arnold hasn't got a clue about it, but it relates directly to some work done within marketing by Michael Fournier on this paradoxical notion of modern consumptions. They are a couple of postmodernists, so we don't really like them, but it was an interesting paper from 1998, where they say, well, any technology will make you competent and incompetent at the same time. It'll both fulfill needs and create needs. It'll engage you and disengage you. So anybody who's been with a teenager and start talking to them and then they are texting at the same time, the absent-present problem. Then, of course, you're both engaged and disengaged. It's freedom and enslavement. I've got 5 minutes left. Terrible. I'm almost done. So the point is, of course, in that complex relationship, the way we look at it is not like this. the way we feel it is like this. So the way we at least sold it by the people who produce the technology is that the technology is straightforward and simple. It will make us happier. It will make life better. But the complex engagement in that is something we are not used to. So one of the key theses I have in the book I've written about mobile technologies at work is that if we take the technological opportunities and have them meet the everyday paradoxes of life, then this life with technology is this so far. It's combinations of, we can say, emerging actions and planned actions. But what really happens now is it mostly is this side that is winning. It's this, it becomes fluid. And what we really do not engage so much with are trying to establish boundaries for this fluidity. And this is very difficult because they're not like the usual boundaries where you just say, here's your office, stay here and talk with whoever comes by, whoever you have meetings with. Or this is your family, only talk with your family. Because it's a much more complex challenge that involves us trying to continuously negotiate these boundaries. And so far we are complete amateurs with the technology, so we haven't started doing that yet. But you can say examples, Google Bus, anyone? You know, they're examples of services that clearly creates this explosion of interaction that doesn't fit, and then they are rejected. And then there are others that have managed to stay more limiting and therefore be successful. In my view, one of the main reasons why Facebook is successful more than MySpace was not only that Facebook had better technologists, they had better coders than MySpace. It was also they started out being very limited. You could only be Facebook friends with your real friends, with somebody that either you knew or that was at the same school as you. Now that's not the case anymore, but at the inception there was these clear boundaries. And I think this is the important part of the success. I'll have to drop this one, I'm sorry. It's very interesting, you can read the book. I want to get to the conclusion. It's just, this is the first time I've given the talk, so I'm clearly overshot significantly. I have 3 minutes left, perfect. So this notion that interaction happens anywhere, with anyone, anytime, it's been sold to us again and again and again. But interaction is always sometime, somewhere, someone. It's never just anytime, anywhere. There's always particular reasons. The problem is, however, if our interaction drifts, so we end up thinking that, that life is symmetrical. Interaction is never symmetrical. Just because I want to be your friend doesn't mean that you want to be my friend. You know, that's the norm. I used to say, 20 years ago, I said, I know Bill Gates, but he doesn't know me. So the point is, in everyday life, this technology thinks that what is important to us is that everything is like the law of entropy, that everything just disappears, in all barriers disappear, and that is not the case. You could say, so the fact that there are now YouTube channels is an example to try and say, okay, we need to organize some barriers around your understanding of what is your YouTube as an example. And now these polarizational boundaries, this needs to be anchored somehow. And if you look at the successes of the platforms, there's the platform successes with Apple and the Android and iOS platform is an example of this anchoring. So people are thinking, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but at least if I have to choose between 500,000 apps, I can just go into Apple's App Store and there's 5 apps suggested. I can just choose those. There are rankings. There are all sorts of ways of putting up barriers to this massive amount of information. And here, the real issue is that the instant connectivity it only leaves the maintenance of the relationships to each individual. And if technology is going to make our lives better, then we will have to somehow increasingly rely on the technology to mediate the relationships, and not only allow us to create them and then maintain them ourselves. And the idea is that technology so far is mostly based on breaking boundaries rather than erecting meaningful ones. And that's a balance that clearly, I think, in design terms needs to be changed. Yeah. And then the last slide. And the point here is, I think that most technological innovations and most technology companies, they assume a very linear relationship between the user and the technology. And it is like a pair of shoes that needs to be worn in by the user every day to take on new meanings. And that, if you look at it, Apple, they stroke lucky by reluctantly allowing the App Store. And that was simply a very easy way for them to allow the smartphone to become a pair of shoes you could walk in yourself. But this notion of a relationship is, of course, that's a different talk, and I can give that, but then I would require a large fee. Because the talk about how do you understand this negotiation is really, really difficult, because, of course, any time the technology listens to you, it also observes you. So the privacy usability trade-off, which we are all discussing at the moment, is really problematic, because we will have to give up our privacy at some point. It's not whether or not, it's just the price and the curve. How fast we give it up, that's important. That's it. I'm done. On the slides at the end, there's lots of stuff on what I've done and what we're doing, and lots of links. You can see there's a book. Go out and buy it, it's very cheap. And some reports that are free, and some work I've done with Google. Yeah, there you go. There are the reports if you want to read them. There's some work with Microsoft. We don't talk about that. All the references are in here. Thank you ever so much for your attention. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, because I'm too close. Wow, it's a dubstep microphone. Wow.
It's okay. Yeah,
Oh, there's another one, so can you just take this one?
it's time to the question and the comment and do you have any? Yes.
So I'll venture a thought. I'm not sure I'd buy. I know you said it was a different talk. I'm not sure I'd buy that you have to give up privacy. It seems like people. I totally understand what you mean, in that if you send a message to someone or some people, it took you some effort to write it, but then if it has many recipients, it's a multiplicative effect. So there's the cost, there's the friction in the system. However, if you're anonymous, it sort of takes away some of the social norms of reciprocity that you expect from your physical acquaintances.
Yeah, but people never complain about that. People never complain about that I know that you sent me an email. That's not it.
Well, you might complain that I didn't respond to your email. So it's good if you can filter a lot of things. It lets you cope with this problem.
Yeah.
And if you're anonymous, it's even easier to filter because maybe you don't even know who's reading, right?
Yeah.
And so communities can self-assemble in this new space that's like disoriented from the current one, but it could be a relatively smooth transition.
Yeah.
If you have anonymity, I think is important.
Yeah. But I think the example I would use, I can't find it, but I have one of these cards, Suica cards. So in London we have the Oyster card. And my argument would always be, you can choose between just topping up yourself, putting money in, or you can have it linked to your, on the web, to your bank account. So every time your money goes to a certain level, it just tops up automatically. And the point is, that all I'm saying is that for me, it's perfect. I never have to queue up. It's so easy, I never have to queue up. On the other hand, if I was a young 25-year-old Muslim, going through the tube system in London every single day using this card and having it linked to my identity and credit card, I would be nervous. Because the world of the future is full of false positives. That just because I went this time and then some other bloody idiot, he explodes the tube station like they did in 2007 or 2005, then I'm suddenly in the light of some stupid false positive search. Now, every time I travel, my credit cards get blocked because I travel to places where people scam money away. And then it's all false positives. And therefore, I think the problem is, it's whether you trust the system not to slam you with a false positive. And that's it. And that takes time because, obviously, I am never afraid of Amazon slamming with anything when I buy a book online. I have only good experiences buying books. I have a terrible experience buying their cloud services, but that's another thing, where they bunged me with $300 for something I didn't spend. But the point is before we get all these experiences, that we can trust it, and it has to be small steps, but I mean, the technology companies like yours is very eager because it's driven by geeks who say it is better. And you're right, it is better. But it doesn't mean people will accept it. And also, it takes a lot to gain trust, but it only takes a tiny bit or even hearsay to remove it. So the problem is, of course, whether this young Muslim in London will dare have his identity linked to this card, where this trace of behavior around the network for 10 years suddenly leads to you're in a cell somewhere. That's a real problem. Yeah?
You have mentioned about the paradox, about the technology, you can connect or not connect. I think, what do you think, is it a choice of the person that can actually select it? The technology just give them options?
Yes, so this is the old argument that technology is neutral, and that's a wrong argument. Technology is neither neutral nor not neutral. So it's neither positive nor negative nor neutral. You can't say it doesn't make sense. It is always neutral and always not neutral at the same time.
A lot of people talking about technology seeing their life and overflow with information, right?
Yeah.
But you have the choice of turning off your phone if you don't want a phone.
Yes.
Or you don't want to do that.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then all your friends say, why can't I reach you? So the point is, of course, what is happening here is what's called institutionalization. It's this process where you have individual choice, and suddenly there's these institutions built around you that means you don't have choice. Here's one institution. Can you go to Shibuya and sit and work all day? No, you can't. You have to sit in your office, I assume. Whereas in other organizations you don't. So the point is, you can say it's right. So individual choice is part of the solution. I agree. But the problem we have is that these individual choices are shaped, and this is Rich Ling's book, New Tech, New Ties. It's about how our social relations they change over time. So of course, in many places now, whenever you go to a meeting, housekeeping first, turn off your mobile. You hear that all the time. So we have to have these rituals and these routines, and that is sort of common etiquette. But the problem is, a lot of these are very, very difficult to have because our social process of generating the etiquette is much slower than the technological development of giving new opportunities. But it's clear, lots of people are now talking about the death of email, that it just becomes not good enough for the purpose because it is too intensive for what you get back. Whereas, Ola and Jungian, they don't use email now. So you use Facebook. You just put on Facebook if you have to coordinate. I'm still old-fashioned, So I'm still use email. But young people, they use other means that are more effective. If you look at Twitter, for example, it's very successful because of its asymmetry. That Ashton Kutcher, who's got now 4 million, he was the first in the world to have 2 million friends, followers. But he doesn't follow 2 million, he followed 215 or something. So the point is that there's a barrier of asymmetry. And this is one of the arguments in some of the slides I had to skip, unfortunately, but you can read the book, available on themobilitybook.com. It's one of the problems we have in current mobile technologies. They only allow two things: portability and communication, portability and connectivity. That's what people mostly use their mobile phones for. They don't allow you easily to prioritize. So your example exactly is, wouldn't it be nice to have more advanced filters to automatically, filter things away? But we need to understand what premises to do that on. Because in the old Nokia phone I could make all sorts of filters, but it would take longer to update those filters constantly than it would for me to actually use them for something. I might as well just talk to people that called instead of updating the filters. And this is, of course, why technology companies like Google, who will have increasingly aggregated information about us and our behavior, will be able to offer us these kind of filters. But it requires that these companies understand technology in other terms than those of technologies. So the basic point is, technology is far too important to be left to technologies, because in the hands of technologies, it'll be very interesting, but also very damaging in the long run.
Just to let you know that the newest Android allows you to actually don't take the call right now, and you can send a message, I'm busy.
Yes, yes, very good. Very good. So in retrospect, you got the message. Fantastic. Yes, any more questions?
I got one more.
Yeah.
One thing I find personally very curious are these brand pages on social networks, like Coca-Cola has a page on Facebook.
Yeah.
And people seem to interact with them.
Yeah.
It seems, if I understood your presentation right, it seems like there's an imbalance here, because companies and governments already do impersonal relationships, but people are just tuned to personal relationships.
Yes.
So, do you have any thoughts about that? It seems like this could be a huge denial of service on human attention.
Yeah, well, yes, so of course, but so the brand pages on Facebook are not about the brands, but about the communities. So it's about community. It's about I pledge my allegiance to this brand, and I want to chat to other people. I want to show, So if you take the example, so I joined Twitter when Twitter was a couple of weeks old or something. So I had a Twitter account. So then I posted a message saying, "Hey, test," and then I went on Twitter's front page to see if I could see my own message, and I couldn't. It was already too late. So I thought to myself, this is useless. What do I need this for? And then half a year ago, I ended up having like 45 or 50 followers on Twitter. So I tweeted my second message: "Why are you following me?" So the point is, of course, people that follow me, it's not because they want to listen to what I tweet, because I don't tweet. And there are followers that come along the way. It's not that the 45 came the first minute after. No, they come like up to an hour before I send this message. No, they just thought it's former students, to be honest. It's just people say, "Yeah, I know this guy, he's I'm following him, I'm trendy, yeah." Little do they know that I don't tweet anything. But the point is the same with these, so you want to create community, and you can use the arguments I make in the same sense. It's a way in this fluid, horribly atomized, pulverized world to get some sort of village going. The old-fashioned village with inbreeding and having sex in the hay while you are harvesting and getting up early in the morning and having a good, healthy lifestyle and die when you're 30. It's really about communities, and how people are desperate to get these communities, which of course is why Facebook is so popular. So Google search in the beginning is brilliant as an engineering feat. I mean, my first use of Google was before you guys were born, almost. It was when the Google URL was this long, before it was called Google. And it worked much better than all the other search engines, but the point is, it doesn't create any community. So what people want is barriers and boundaries and villages, but they have to be fluid villages where you can join more than one at the same time. And this is about erecting boundaries, bounding the unbounded. And it's very difficult, because immediately we are hit with your argument, people should have free choice. And I think there's one thing we can learn from Apple. Before the iPod, we had no clue we needed one. Before Facebook, we had no clue we needed it. So the world of technology development is one of not letting people do what they want, but to tell them what they can do and then let them see that this is actually much better. So it's about having thought leadership and create boundaries, not about just following the ones that are there. Yeah? We're done. We're on time, as we're supposed to be in Tokyo. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.